her.
Oh,
We just
it
started.
just, yeah.
Okay, hi. A very good evening to everyone. Thank you for joining in for a very pertinent discussion around mental well-being in the legal profession. My name is Smriti Makarmitha. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a psychologist and a practicing psychotherapist with about 15 years of experience, also the co-founder of Equilibrium Advisory LLP. Equilibrium Advisory LLP is a firm that's committed to providing legal remedies and psychological interventions to build equitable and safe workplaces. And we partner with organizations across industry verticals to look at the implementation and compliances with psychosocial laws. And in our conversation, we have realized that one forgotten community has been the legal fraternity, who has been really been driven to be looking at complying with law, working towards justice for different individuals as well, also sometimes taking a toll on their mental well-being. And this is a suffering that they are seeming to be happening in isolation. When in my practice, when I come across individuals, they do talk about that there is no space to slow down. When I talk about how you're feeling, what is coming up for you, they would limit it to facts and not emotions. And it really takes a while to uncover those emotions as well. And in that conversation, that really led me to start thinking about what is the mental well-being status in the legal fraternity. What is it that the law firms, the bar associations are doing as well? And that prompted me to really have a conversation with my colleagues at Equilibrium Advisory. All of them who are lawyers here, fairly accomplished lawyers like Sana Hakim, who is also my colleague and a co-founder of Equilibrium Advisory, practicing at the High Court and Family Court with about 15 years of experience. Vindhya comes with human from the human rights field as well, worked very closely in that domain and working with individuals. Diksha and Tusharika, really younger in the forum out here, but also really going to become the voice of students and young lawyers, and what the challenges have been as well in the student community when you are kickstarting your career as well, and to really understand the discipline and the choices we have to make, and how do we really navigate through these power dynamics that come in as well. So it's really a privilege to be hosting this conversation with all four of my very dear friends and colleagues here. And just to set some context, and then before I bring them into this conversation, I was actually going over this study that happened by the International Bar Association. It was a global survey that was done that did talk about the experience of of the legal professionals and the mental well-being status. And it was not to my surprise, but I would like to put down some facts and the results that the study came out with. It spoke about how legal professionals experience higher levels of depression, anxiety, lower levels of mental well-being than members of the general population. Over a third of legal professionals feel that their work negatively affects their mental well-being. Nearly half of all legal professionals who were surveyed indicated that they do fear of the impact of their career if they do talk about their mental well-being status and the fact they're languishing, they're struggling, and not able to make it. Uh, it was very interesting. It also brought out the intersection experience as well, which spoke about how there are greater levels of difficulties with mental well-being of people in the legal fraternity who are younger, female, from an ethnic minority, or people with disability. Some of the issues that came out was the fact that there is vicarious trauma. There are a lot of triggering issues as well when people are working with survivors of abuse and violence. So intensive work demands, poor work-life balance, and then resorting to unhealthy coping strategies, even to misuse of alcohol and substances. Uh, it also emerged that there is a toxic workplace culture that does emerge in academic institutions and formal workplaces, also resulting in experiences of bullying, harassment, and sexual harassment. Conversation also did really branch out to talking about how it's a very lonely profession, and especially self-employed legal professionals do get affected by lack of support and uncertainty. So even though these are some of the conversations that are happening internally in the legal fraternity, there is very less acknowledgement of these issues, and more and lesser focus on what the organizations and associations need to be doing. And my hope from today's conversation is to bring in front and center these conversations through the lived experiences from the voices of the legal fraternity itself. So I would like to invite now all of my colleagues present here to talk about these aspects. The structure of this conversation would be I will throw in a question at you, but I would like all of you to bring in your experiences from your unique positions, whether it's the discipline and the branch of the legal fraternity, the place where you're at right now, and your experiences with your colleagues in the profession as well, right? Since we are talking about well being, I also want to understand from all of you, what does well being mean for you as an individual, as a lawyer? Sana, can I invite you into this conversation and
Sure.
start off?
I was just about to ask. So that's also very, for me, this is a great sign of well-being being asked that would you like to go first and, speak. That is usually so where, we also come from a background. So litigation background, it's not everybody, it's a very competitive background from where I come from initially. So I started off my career. I'm a second generation lawyer. So I had the comfort and the privilege in a way of my father's shadow in a way to sort of start kickstart my career. So I did get a lot of exposure earlier on, but when I observed the same around me, that was not the case, right? So right, like you correctly pointed out, Smriti, right from the junior lawyers perspective, that's where the struggle really starts. Not to say that there was no struggle for me as a second generation lawyer. That's a different set of pressure altogether. But I think I'll come back to your question about what does well-being mean for me in generally in life. For me personally, well-being would mean that I can express myself completely. I can bring um, give my 100% to whatever I do, right? I'm mentally, emotionally invested in whatever I do, be it my work, be it my personal space. For me, that's personal well-being for me. And I think that also becomes a reflection. If I'm personally aware and I'm personally, mentally, and emotionally there, then I think that also reflects in my work and it applies to any human being, right? So for me, from that perspective, you have to be very, the inner strength and that whole idea of being strong from within is not overrated. And that's something that you get a feel of and you get a sense of who you really are, especially in this field that we are in. And I'm being litigation specific right now, right? So and well-being for me in the litigation space, and again being specific there as well, would be not having any preconceived notions. I think there are a lot of preconceived notions that you go through based on how you appear, based on what gender you belong to, what is your name, if you know what I mean by that, and of course how you are, how confident you are at your work. I think why the last point should be the only criteria, how much you know, but that's not the only criteria, and there are a lot of other parameters that we'll have to go through to sort of prove our metal and show that we mean something, and proving yourself again and again. So uh, well-being for me would also would mean just not having that space to even express and be vulnerable in this space where being vulnerable is considered a sign of weakness, not really a sign of strength. So I think I'll just pause here and maybe hand over to my other colleagues and panelists.
Yeah, taking forward from what Sana just said, uh, well-being for me would be being able to speak, like there being a safe space for me to speak about it without any stigma attached to it. Professionally, well-being would be kind of different because it has to be multifaceted. Because now, me practicing litigation for last 4 years, it's a very physically and emotionally challenging job. So it has to be multifaceted for me, the well-being. And in that sense, I have to have job satisfaction. I have to see my career trajectory properly. So if I am able to see that, and if there's job satisfaction and I'm able to sustain myself, so that would bring a lot of like stress-free life, and that's what I connect well-being to in this profession. So that is for it's for me. Vidya.
Well, thank you so much, Smriti, for even having us over this roundtable. To answer your question regarding what would well-being mean to me, In the legal profession, I would answer it in 3 points. One is the fact that, I mean, personally for me, I thought that I wanted to be a lawyer when I was in standard 9, despite knowing nothing about the profession whatsoever, and just thought there was nothing else that I was made to do. So when I attended, you see a lot of these Bollywood movies, or you see a lot of information regarding law, and that's the only idea probably that people have of it even before they get into it. And with that excitement and enthusiasm, I always pursued it. But when I got into the career, I would say that yes, there were a lot of struggles that Sana and Deeksha have already talked about. So if I were to define well-being in the legal profession, one has to be that there is intellectual stimulation, that you like the subject, you want to read more about it, see how it is negotiated or applied practically. That is one. The second has to be servicing of law to the clients. Because, and the reason I mention that is because here is sometimes where vicarious trauma comes to you as well. It's because when you're trying to explain to your client that what you're going to start on, what journey are you going to start on when you file a case or you are a part of litigation, is that they constantly need assurances. They are constantly asking questions: when will this happen? How will this move forward? What are we going to do next? And there are so many questions, so many anxiety and apprehensions. So even though sometimes those anxieties are actually not yours, they become yours because eventually you're servicing that client on a daily basis. So I think doing that very well, so that the client has the confidence in me. And lastly, definitely financial security, like Deeksha talked about. Of course, career trajectory is one part of it, but you won't be able to grow even in your career if you're financially still struggling for taking care of your basic survival needs, especially for people who move from one state to another. For these kind of jobs, it's harder for them. So this is how I would say, if that is, these three things are taken care of, it would definitely mean some kind of balance or well-being in the legal profession. Thank you.
Hi. So, just to give a little background about myself before I start off. So, I am a first generation lawyer and I am new to the profession and still starting off in figuring out the legal landscape. So, while I second and agree to all the points that are shared by my colleagues, there is this I think the people of my generation or the people who are in the same level as me, they don't think well-being as such multifaceted like it is conceptually, because at this stage when we're starting off and experimenting and exploring, I think there are two things that come to my mind that would mean well-being to me, which is a space of learning where I can get that guidance or get that space to again, like Bindya said, get an intellectual stimulus to keep on going, and also at the same time balancing with the need to unwind, because it is still new and we just kind of got out of college, so it's still very fresh. So there is that need to unwind and get out of all the stressors which are still new for us. So those two needs are extremely important and how I would define my well-being as.
Right, right. Thank you so much for really talking about and unpacking well-being. And I want to actually put it all together because I think Sana beautifully said that it has to be a space where you're able to express yourself, be emotionally invested. It almost seems like that you're able to show up every single day, and as a matter of choice, not because you have to. Uh, and to be able to be vulnerable, to be able to embrace yourself, and to be able to express your authentic self as well, which will also become possible only if there are no preconceived notions around appearance, name, age, gender, caste, religion, so and so forth. And that also allows for, taking to Shalika's point, that to be able to then also learn in that field, right? Because that's how one also grows and evolves as an individual, as a professional, and to be able to then balance it out with space to unwind, which is what even Deeksha spoke about, of having more of a multifaceted life, to be able to really navigate those demands and to while you are also dealing with that vicarious trauma that Bindya spoke of as well, right? So there are these demands, physical demands, emotional demands, and I can imagine for the litigating lawyer from going from one court to the other court and getting things done and moving files, getting those dates, and especially when you're just starting off, right, in your career as well. And while you're also working with the clients as well, where their fears, their anxieties, like Bindya spoke, becomes your own. And then there's also the fact that will I be able to support them effectively? Am I a good enough lawyer as well? So while you're being available to your clients, you're also grappling one's own anxieties, insecurities, and doing it all by yourself, especially if there is no guidance and support, because what I understand, it is a very lonely profession. Along with that, there is also the need to sustain. How do you sustain yourself financially? And how do you really measure success in this profession, right? Because here again, when you think of lawyers like Vindhya spoke of in Bollywood movies, it seemed like a very glamorized profession. People are coming out of their big fancy cars, leading a very fancy lifestyle, but that's not the ground reality. That's only a experience of a handful of lawyers as well. And then what is success? And another aspect that what I have come across as well is also this constant conflict with one's values as well. So while I'm choosing to be authentic to myself as well, and wanting to also make it be successful in the normative ideas, be financially successful, have a sense of stability, and not be in conflict with my values. Yeah. And I'm wondering now, that really makes me curious, how many, I mean, the four of you now, how much have you been able to achieve the sense of well-being and this definition of well-being that you just spoke of? How close or far are you from this? And you can be a voice of the community. It doesn't have to be your own experience, but just be a voice of the community. How easy or challenging it is to achieve the sense of well-being?
You'll be shocked at, sorry if I may, I can just
Yes,
take the liberty
please.
to start, right? Um, so I think time. I have seen, and I've seen that progression. I speak for my, in my circles. I have seen, and I can speak for my maybe my female colleagues and my male colleagues, right? And I think and even if not adding gender to it, even as a from a humane perspective, I have seen people grow from very coy, shy, awkward individuals to extremely flamboyant and very confident, sometimes even overconfident in their demeanor. I think time and how you've been able to navigate around all the stresses and the challenges that are thrown at you, is time is the biggest testament. So if I have a thumb rule, I may be completely wrong about this, but I feel that if you are in this profession, I'm talking about litigation specifically, if you're running around in courts, carrying those files, taking flake from the clients, taking flake from the judges, from the court staff, nobody makes it really, really easy for you. Let's be very honest there. Especially when you're in the trial courts, you have to run from one court to the other because trial courts in our country, in our city, are also very in Mumbai city are also very spaced out. So again, if you had a trial court lawyer, that also factors in. If you've done through that, you've sort of been through all of that struggle, and you've been able to do it for a 3 to 4 year rule. I have the 3 to 4 year rule. If you're able to sustain yourself to 3 to 4 years, I feel at the end of it, for lack of a better word, you become so thick skinned that nothing bothers you. You're quite unfazed by a lot of things, right? Having said that, you're in constant the value conflict that you spoke of, Smriti, that doesn't really go away, right? You are, because it also depends on the field or the kind of area you're practicing in. So for example, I can speak for some criminal lawyers, because I come from that law background. I can speak for some family court lawyers, because that's a different altogether, a space altogether, where you tend to get emotionally invested with the client folks that you're dealing with, right? So again, your value system differs even from the area of practice that you're doing, right? Many times the most asked question that I get is, oh, if a person tells you that the person is guilty, would you still go ahead and represent them? That's the most commonly asked question that any when I tell people that I'm from a criminal law background. My simple answer to that question is that if somebody tells me that this is what has happened, I'm supposed to represent the person. Nobody comes, and I have not gotten anybody. I may be completely off again. Maybe I'm an exception. I haven't gotten again anybody coming to me saying that I have committed this. Now, please save me. Right? Our job, we are representatives. We are the voice of people who want to be heard, and who are ultimately their voices and their side of the story is going to get adjudicated by another person. So we are not judges, we are not investigators, we are representatives. And if somebody is telling us, then to articulate it properly, get all the laws and everything in place, that's our job, and that's how we should be viewing it. This whole angle of morality and value system is never asked to the judge, is never asked to anybody else in the system. Only lawyers get the flake of it, which is always been beyond me. Okay, so I think but conflict in value system does happen to an extent, but you're not going to get into that conversation. Whatever client provides you in terms of evidences or information, is that something that you need to collate. And yes, there are people from my fraternity who also exaggerate things. I'm not taking anything away from the fact they also lie. That's something that you should not be doing. Whatever it is, try and make the best of it. Easier said than done, but not a lot of people, unfortunately, from the fraternity follow it, and that's where the bad mouthing and the value discussion even comes from. What are you really doing with that information that the client or the evidence that the client is giving you? Are you using it or are you misusing it? So I think that's where I think the value clash may lie for me. At least.
Thank you, Sana. Can get some
Maybe I
more
can go
thoughts.
next.
Yeah.
As far as, I mean, as a person who's worked in human rights or worked with NGOs directly and been a civil rights activist, I would definitely say that what you define as success in one area of law may not be success in another area of law. So when I joined the profession and I said, oh, I'm going to work with NGOs, they were like, you're going to work with NGOs? What are you going to do there? Right? How will you make money out of it? I thought lawyers make a lot of money, right? So their idea was that. And then, and there, was I able to say that, oh, I did find success, or was I able to strike a balance? I think it's very important for everybody, regardless of just being in legal profession, that instead of thinking where you could have been, you have to take one day at a time and see on that day how much 100% are you giving. On that day, if you're happy with your preparation and your presentation in court, then it doesn't end there. The next day you have to work harder, and then people have started recognizing you. So that's one thing. So sometimes, for me at least, being recognized as a person who worked for domestic violence or child sexual abuse victims was itself a good enough measure of success back then, as opposed to when I shifted to criminal litigation, where I started appearing in bail applications in High Court or quashing of FIRs in High Court. There was suddenly a shift in the value conflict, because the victims who I was supporting in the NGOs, now I was supporting exactly the people who are on the opposite side of it, helping them getting their FIR quashed. But again, as a human rights lawyer, we've always been trained and conditioned to understand that it is right to representation that everybody holds under the law. So I think when you understand that, you are able to know that, again, morality is also a compass which is subjective. Something which was not illegal 100 years back today will be, and the same thing tomorrow can become a norm. So again, going back by the same concept that Sana was saying. And the last one where you said how close are we? I think on a scale of 1 to 10, I would say it's getting better, but I'm at 6.
If I could go next,
Yes, Tusharika, you gotta mute Tusharika. Just unmute yourself.
yeah, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah, so listening to Bindya and Sana, honestly, from the lens that I'm coming from, I would like to say that that stage where you're at, where you're dealing with these conflicts, these are actually the aspiration for our age group. Because I'll tell you a perspective that, when we're still experimenting and exploring the legal landscape and we're stepping into it, so a lot of us, a lot of my peers and my friends that I've talked to, they face a struggle with not getting valuable work, which is a huge problem, and you feel insignificant with that position that you're given in the initial years. And I'm talking about people who are less than 5 years into the profession, or maybe did something but are entering the legal profession now, are less than 5 years into the legal profession. So we are given given by irrespective of which field that we are in, whether it's corporate, whether it's litigation or consulting, advisory, any kind of field that we choose under the legal profession. Initially it's all about drafting or assisting, and which is great because it does help you eventually, but it gives that space. It gives a space of self doubt even more, because you feel you're not adding value, you're not contributing enough to what you actually envisioned when you were in school, or say when you imagined that you will be a lawyer one day. So the expectations and reality do not actually match, which is the root of a lot of mental health problems in law students as well as young and aspiring legal professions. So that is something that I'd like to highlight for this conversation that we're having. And answering the question again, that how are we navigating and where we're at, again, like Vindhya said, every day is a struggle. And for people who are new to this profession, I think we're not even 10% there, because the day that we feel okay, there is less work, you begin to doubting yourself, those thoughts creep in. And the day that there is a lot of work, and might be administrative, might be logistical, but there is a lot of work, you feel it's too hectic, am I in the right space? So it's a constant struggle balancing that hectic or not so hectic, and to get that time to, without the guilt, actually think about what you want and why are you in the profession, is an everyday struggle, I feel.
So when you talk about where you are at in the stage of well-being, you have to obviously come from a it has to be a very personal experience. And in law and in psychology, we have this thing where we fake it till we make it. And 4 years into the law, I think I'm still faking it, in the sense that when you're in litigation, you have to have this hard exterior, you have to sell that facade so that the client has confidence in you. So it's that stage of like faking it until you finally make it. And then how do you go on doing it is like a constant check-in with yourself. Like when you're entering into litigation, talking about short-term goals itself is forbidden. So you know you're stepping into that world knowing that you can't really talk about short-term goals, you're in that for a long run. So preparing yourself, and then also checking in emotionally with yourself, because everybody has some form of anxiety, everybody has that before they go to sleep. So checking in with yourself as to when you need intervention. You can't put all form of emotional turmoils you're feeling from, be it if you take sparrows and swans and then put them in the same box, it won't work. You have to like label what you're feeling and then ask for that intervention, talk to someone. So these kind of check-ins constantly, and then being prepared mentally that you're in this for the long run, no matter what the ups and downs are, you're there for the long run. So then kind of like telling yourself that you're gonna be okay. So that's how you keep up with your mental health and like check in with the well-being and everything. So yeah.
Right. So thank you for sharing your views on this. And while I was listening to all of you, I think there were three things that were broadly standing out to me. One was, I think, just the unique challenges that come with the legal profession. Because the experiences that you were talking about as well, of going, say, for example, going from, say, one court to the other court, right? Having extensively traveled, the kind of demands that are placed on you as a lawyer is very unique to this profession. You don't talk about this. People may say in consulting you have to travel extensively, but to able to even work with systems and the systemic challenges that comes with it in this profession as well. That's one. Second is also talking about just these expectations that people have from you if you're a lawyer, or the expectation that you have from yourself as a lawyer as well, right? Which also stems to the fact of what is a measure of success. How much fees are you charging on hourly basis? How much fees are you charging for just appearing in the court as well? Or the what's your fame like? What's your client base like? So I think even, and as Vindhya said, that it would also change within the verticals of the legal profession itself. Like, from an NGO perspective, human rights, I'm talking about justice. On the other aspect, could be completely different, right? The value conflict that Sana also spotlighted, the fact that being asked this question, if someone tells you I'm guilty, would you really take that case? Would you stand up for that person, right? No one else really gets asked this question, right? In any other profession, at that point in time, even doctors. Say, for example, someone has injured who has perhaps transgressed boundaries for some people or have violated certain laws. Also, they don't question doctors. Would you operate on that person or not? But as lawyers, they do get questioned, right? So I think it's very, very unique there as well. And also the kind of work that we do, like we come so close to, say, violence, abuse, like, because I'm taking the example because then they did talk about domestic violence, child sexual abuse. So there is that vicarious trauma as well, right? And like, unlike psychologists and therapists as well, we are trained to work with violence, right? Like there is trauma informed care therapies that we get trained into. How do we deal with those? In legal profession, as part of your training, I don't think that conversation really happens, and there's no curriculum around that as well. So you're on one hand also expected to show empathy, actively listen, also come up with arguments as well, and really find that balance between your emotional value conflict and that intellectual cognitive stimulation that really needs to take place and being putting up out there. So very, very unique challenges that we're talking about. Even work-life balance, right? So whether it's litigation, corporate law, I know I've got so many friends, clients, colleagues who do talk about that there are extensive work hours. There is no time for anything. Like there's no time to even date. And if you're married, then marriage is on the rocks. There's no time to even have children, and then there are jokes around those aspects as well. So so there are also those unique challenges that we look at there. The second thing that really stands out from this is that paradox, right? Where we're talking about wanting to be vulnerable, which is my definition of being emotional well-being. But on the other hand, we're saying we have to fake it till we make it. We need to show that facade that no, that we can do this regardless of what is going to be thrown at us, especially if there is an opponent or there is a team that is fairly accomplished in, again, the normative understanding of success as well, right? And how do you really then keep yourself together in those situations? And then what really happens to vulnerability and having a multifaceted life, right? And third thing that really stands out to me is this need, almost like an implicit need, to become thick skinned, to be able to have that facade of being very strong and to faking it as well, right? And my concern as a therapist now is the fact that what is it doing to the well-being of that person right now? Because it's a constant struggle of not being able to embrace your authentic self, right? That there's no space to even sit with those emotions also, right? And why is there a need to become thick skinned? Why is there a need to be resilient? And how resilience is applauded, where the question needs to be, how do we really navigate those systemic barriers? Perhaps it's a very utopian question I'm asking here right now, but it does make me wonder. And I'm wondering if these kind of conversations also happen. And I would like to really now get very vulnerable in this conversation, right? That to really talk about the raw emotions that do come up for lawyers, right? And if I could invite all of you to really, you know, uh, really get in touch with their emotions at this point in time and say that what are some of the fears, insecurities that lawyers do experience? What are some of the situations that they come across where they are reminded that maybe you're not cut out for this, you're not ready for this right now. You're reminded of your age, your gender, your ethnicity, and maybe if you can give some examples out there without naming anyone, but just to really understand the true experience of lawyers and the unique challenges.
I think maybe I can request anybody else to
Yeah, I can
start.
go ahead.
Yeah.
I can start this. So, as human being, we have this flight and fight mode, but in this profession, you have to constantly be prepared to have that fight mode on every time, and I don't think that's natural. Constantly being, either you're preparing for that fight or you're fighting, and that seems quite unnatural to me. Also, with legal profession, there is this unique, very unique challenge where on everyday basis, either we hear about something which is very gruesome, very graphic, but then we have to keep it to ourselves. We can't like have a debrief about it because of client confidentiality and stuff like that. So there's a lot of ethical trauma. Sometimes you wouldn't agree with what the client has done with, but then it is you have taken that oath to then represent him because yes, he's come to you. So then dealing with that ethical trauma all alone, like you Smithy mentioned, that it's like a lonely job when you some client approaches you. So these are such some vulnerable moments in my life or cases that have come to me where I have second guessed my choice as to why did I choose this profession? Is this profession for me and all that? So these are the things for me. Yeah.
So I'd go next. So I'd like to elaborate on the experience starting from the law school stage to the early legal professions. So in the law school, while we're being trained in the practical realities of how life would look like, being in moot courts, which are mock court rounds, or there are some trial advocacies, and there are different projects that you're constantly have in your day-to-day life. So even in those not so real situations, the environment at law school level is extremely toxic, and it's so cutthroat. Even when the people that we're up against are students and learners themselves, like nobody is in real practicing or owner or partner of some firm. We are at an educational institute, to be real. And the environment honestly is especially in the last few years, when we are about to graduate the fourth fifth years of law school, and then going to when you've just graduated, the the stressors and the pressure on a particular person, irrespective of whether they have a family backing from the legal background or not, is extremely high, to an extent that there is no space to even discuss or share with anybody, because nobody would understand, and you feel isolated, and you feel like nobody would understand, because everyone is dealing with their own battles, that they don't want to entertain those conversations themselves, because they are so closed up and isolated in their own world. And I'd like to share this experience or confess that I personally started therapy in my last year of law school, because the pressure was so much. And being a first generation lawyer, I could not navigate how to deal with the diverse options that the legal profession offers. While I knew what I wanted to do, while I clearly had an interest in a particular field, but we have to understand the legal profession is so unique that everything in our surrounding right now has a law. Like food has a law, media has a law, crime has a law. Everything that we see in our probably room right now has some is rooting and going towards some law which is governing that. So there's so many options, and when there is no guidance, no mentorship, and again, lack of conversation within our peers, it gets extremely lonely. And again, when you enter the profession and when you are seeing the reality, then the expectations don't match. You feel isolated again, and the stakes are extremely high to a level that you cannot digest, that you are responsible to draft a real case, or you are responsible to, in the work that we are doing, you are responsible to draft the report of a real case that is happening. And that is too much pressure and accountability for a person who is just human. So I mean, the stakes are too high, honestly.
No, you know what? As I'm listening to Diksha and Tusharika speak, and I'm just reminiscing about the early days that I was going through, and there was a lot of self doubt. There was a lot of, am I in it for to be in it for the long haul? Having said that, I think what I just want to say here, giving an analogy that you do, Smriti, earlier when you spoke about doctors, right? How nobody asked doctors if they would operate, say, if a rapist is, that somebody has, it's a police case, right? And if the rapist is caught, for example, there's medical tests even for the rapist. Nobody asked the doctor that why did you treat the rapist? You should have just let him be, right? But also, what is told to doctors is that you will see blood, you will see flesh. You have to get used to that idea. This is the reality of life. If you want to do well for somebody, if you want to treat somebody, you can't be emotionally invested in that person. Does not mean that you're not empathetical. I think we need to draw a parallel here. It's not that the lawyers do not have emotions, they are not empathetical, but they just are not emotionally invested. And that does not come naturally to any human being. That skill, that facet has to be honed. About Diksha's point about faking it till you make it. Yes, sure. Initially, I do have to throw a facade, but then what is manifestation? How does manifestation really work? Manifestation is making yourself believe that yes, I can do this. I got this. I will achieve what I set out to do. My intentions, my preparation is out there, and so I will. So, having a positive outlook also, and for whatever big lawyers that you speak to, whatever the books I have read about very senior lawyers in the profession, they all have spoken about manifestation, that self belief, overcoming your self doubts. That's not something only lawyers struggle with. That happens in any profession. Here it's because, like you correctly mentioned, the focus and the spotlight is on you constantly because you're representing. So there's never that space that you can hide behind a colleague or a team member and say, "ये तो मैंने नहीं किया था. I did not do this." So again, there is that you have to take full accountability, and it does take a while for you to come to terms with it and accept it, and then take it up and lead from the front. And I think that sets you apart from quote unquote layman and a lawyer or an advocate. So you have to build that resilience in yourself over a period of time, not at the cost of you not being humane or empathetical. For the longest time, I can speak for myself. I've also taken cases of domestic violence victims. I got so emotionally detached that I felt my questioning also to a victim who had come to me or a survivor who had come to me for representing her were very like insensitive. And when I got back and I was like, why did I even ask that question? I just was mulling. I was like, why am I asking these questions? Like, what is wrong with me? Okay. So then I realized that okay, I'm coming from a place where I mean good for the person. Maybe I can, I can choose different words when I'm saying it. So there's a lot of like a lot of introspection, self evaluation that you tend to do, and I think it's how you see it. It's a perception. Either you can completely break under it or you can become stronger. There is no other midway. That's how it is. Okay, midway, I think for me, balancing would be to not lose sight of empathy and sensitivity. And that, correctly, as everybody's mentioning, that is not taught in our curriculum. And I feel in this field it's so necessary because the kind of people that we deal with need, the clients need empathy. You don't need to be emotionally invested with them, but just be empathetical. Okay, I understand. Or there are breakdowns. I have been so insensitive at times. I'm guilty of that. Where she's breaking down, I'm like, like, do it fast. I need to go somewhere. I just like, and I felt so bad. And when I think about it, that it's not okay for me to do that because I was never like, when I was crying somewhere, like I broke down in front of my colleagues, they'd be like, okay, okay, abhi ho gaya na, chalo, chalo, let's go. Like nobody heard me. I felt, and I think that's the way it is. That's the way world works, probably. So again, you should be sort of acknowledging that side also. I feel like, you have to be not emotionally invested, and there's nothing wrong with it. You're able to do your job well. You're able to be resilient, and yeah.
Yeah. And thank you, Sana, for bringing that focus as well, right? And I want to maybe just wrap up the question that we were discussing earlier and then even move on to already where you have taken the conversation today, right now. So, what I'm also hearing from all of you that the different emotions that people do experience would be around self doubt. There is a lot of this insecurity, a sense of confusion, being lost, that are likely to come in as well, especially when you're just starting off your career as well. In light of lack of guidance, lack of support, there is going to be a sense of loneliness because of the confidentiality, client confidentiality that one experiences, and this ethical trauma that Diksha also brought in as well, right? That of being able to, what is that I really need to be doing? What I'm doing right now, is this what I want? Is this really going to be my purpose and meaning in life? To be able to also start second guessing if this is a path I want to undertake for myself right now. And I know of people in my my clients who have also switched fields as well. They have dabbed with different disciplines under the legal profession itself, from litigation to get into legal research, corporate law, uh, drafting, just not really doing work with NGOs as advisory, getting into HR professions. So they've really gone over a different journey altogether as well, right? And also talking about the experiences where different identities really come to the fore along with a lawyer. Where someone was telling me about the fact that the judge will just ask the name and say, okay, fine, someone is a Brahmin, okay, case done, all right, it's over. Have I lost?
Well, I think I
Did I
can.
lose it?
We're losing you
No,
a little
Smriti,
bit,
we
but
can
I
hear
think we
you,
can hear
Smriti.
you
Go
now.
on.
Go on.
Okay. All right. So, really, so I mean, also bringing different identities along with being a lawyer as well, where the people have spoken of the fact that the judges would just look at a female lawyer and not able to even be listening to the arguments as well, and then give the judgment in favor of the opponent to whom I identify as a male. So there are those experiences as well that we did touch upon those aspects of minority and marginalized identities that lawyers come with. But we've also seen how the space has also evolved, right? Now, like in our high courts, we have a judgment right, and within we gender neutral washrooms, we are recognizing lawyers who are trans as well, right? So we are talking about female lawyers who are very, very accomplished as well. And we can give out like a list of names which will go beyond, in double digits as well. So there have been really that shift that has happened in the legal profession where people are recognizing for their skill set, for their competence as well. There is a lot of now empathy within the fraternity, whereas these conversations on mental well-being are taking place. Now we had a mental healthcare act that was passed in our country as well. So the needle has shifted as well. And I think that's what I think Sana has really shed light on right now. That it's not all bad. It's a space like any other profession will have its own unique challenges, unique demands as well. But there is so much going for it, and that's why we still have people signing up or becoming a lawyer, pursuing that, and also leading a fulfilling life. But yes, it may involve a lot of self work because certain curriculum does not really create space for self reflection or bringing that empathy or that compassion or just to recognize our own emotions also, right? Or to the fact that we need to be available to our colleagues. And just because we are on the opposite sides of the table does not mean that it's about us versus them. We're just becoming, like Sana said, a voice, a representative of someone else, and we're trying to get that voice heard and giving them a fair chance under their constitution. Uh, right? So, and it's about how do we not make it very personal in these situations? How do we also create then spaces to be able to acknowledge that there is some mental well-being, right? And it's no vertical under legal profession is going to be devoid of these challenges, right? But how do we create space and how do we create systems for that? And I think that's where I want to take the conversation right now. That in your journey as lawyers, what and who have supported you? And what do you think can be done in terms of as individuals, as organization, institutions to build that system of support that can support each person's mental well-being?
Bindia, want to
I'll
take it
So
back?
take
first
this.
question, what has supported you? Yes. Go ahead,
I'll just
Vindhya.
start off because my answer is very, very small, unfortunately. Uh, def- I feel there's a lot of individual accountability which one needs to take up. And I can't speak for any other profession, but I feel for the profession that you're in. And if you're truly committed and you're passionate about knowing that, oh, this is where I want to be, all right, you have to constantly introspect your journey here and knowing what works for you, what doesn't work for you. If you think talking to a senior lawyer and telling them that these are the issues that I'm facing helps you, or you have that rapport with the person, definitely do it. If you have a community of friends who are, as law college students, where you always have a group with them, where you can just, vent about, oh, what a bad case I had, or, what a bad judge I got, do that. It's about what works for that particular person. For me, A lot of it was coming back from work and downloading about the entire day with my mother. And then it would be like either a parent or somebody else who's living with you who's going to tell you that, that is just one another bad day. It's okay, this happens. And that is the time when you sit down and think, okay, probably the day went bad, but what did I learn out of it? What is that I could have done differently? And then next day going up with that much resilience and passion again, knowing that you have to come back thinking this, feeling the same frustration, and it is going to be a loop. All right, and that is where I say that if one wants to break that loop, they have to figure out by their own as to what works for them. If because I'm doing a lot of work, maybe just reading some fiction books can help do that. All right, if it is about, say, physical challenges in the court, so I'll give you a personal example that I got my periods while I was in the court, and the next matter was supposed to be called out. And I've realized now that this is the situation. And I'm sure people who have gone to courts know how amazing their bathrooms are as well. Right? So it's not very accessible, not something where you feel hygienic. So I had no other option but to tell a senior advocate who was 64-year-old man that, hey, uh, my stomach is paining and I have to go. And there was that one moment where I knew that the person knows what I'm talking about, but I can't say about it. And yes, the senior advocate was kind enough to say, okay, please go home. Please go home. So if there are certain things where people are supportive to you, it's because of a lot of rapport that you also create with them. So I can't per se say about everyone, but this is what worked out for me. And yes, I've been very fortunate enough that though I've been a first generation lawyer, my seniors in college were extremely supportive. They told us where you should be interning, asking us questions, telling us. I mean, even now that I've moved to a non-litigation role, they constantly keep texting, asking, you know what, you should come back. You should come back to court. We need more women lawyers. You should see what youngsters are doing today in court. And I feel when you have a strong supportive group like that, no matter how many challenges or frustrations the profession gives you, it also gives you the high and the magic, or the dire need to not separate away from it and always be identified as a lawyer. So yeah, that's what helps for me.
If I could go next, while I totally resonate with Sana and Smriti when you say that resilience is needed and self work is needed, I'd like to reiterate what Bindya said, that that support system is extremely important, and the individual work that a person needs to do cannot happen in a vacuum without the support of the community and the society that we are living in, essentially. And that starts from the college level, and then it continues to whatever age that you're going to and whatever age you end in your professional journey. And for me, I feel that the age group of lawyers between, say, like 35 to 40, or who have 15 to 20 years of experience, who are most often our employers also, when we are young and interning at their offices, or even when we are starting off, I think the support or reassurance provided by them is so valuable and so, I think, like, enriching to hear for any person who is just starting out, that it makes the difference in the entire world in that week. And honestly, from the stories that I've heard from my peers, not a lot of people from that generation are even receptive to mental health as a concept, and not it's not their fault, because the way that they were grown up in the surroundings that they were growing up, there was no education on mental health, and they did not have that foundation. But I've also been fortunate that three of the seniors that I've interned under, they have been extremely receptive to new ideas coming from young generation, and they give you that space to to be seen, to be heard, and they value the work that you're putting in, however less that may be in terms of quantity, and they value that, and take that into whatever case that they're going forward with. So that is extremely assuring for us who are starting off. And I would also like to highlight that the culture in the law schools and law colleges, universities, is also extremely important. Like Bindya stated that she had some seniors who uh, who are still in her journey in some way or the other. On the other hand, I do not think that in my college, in my personal journey, there was that kind of guidance coming from seniors. In fact, they were perpetrating that same kind of culture that I was already facing in my own batch. So that support system is important to provide also when we become more experienced than we are now. And that will, I think, that will be the cycle shift that we want in the legal profession, that we provide the support that we did not get when we were starting off or when we were practicing, irrespective of how many years of experience we have, which field that we are practicing in. We give that support to people around us, and I think that will build a good community, and that will make all the problems insignificant.
I can go in next. My answer is really short as to what why I'm so resilient and what helps me go forward is just being very appreciative of the history of what happened in the past, of women putting their first step forward and just going. Women like RBG, Anna Candy, Cornelia Sorabji, just them doing their thing, putting their foot forward, and then we are here now having this discussion, all female in a panel discussion on mental health. This is quite transformative and has, right, if you see from 2000, the revolution has become quite rapid, where we are not only talking about mental health, we are talking about inclusivity, and we see representation. There was no representation before. So for me, the resilience comes from being very appreciative of the past and women who have like really worked hard for us to be here and sit in this panel and talk about it.
Right. Thank you all. And I think I just want to maybe summarize all the strategies that you really put out. And I think want to also just reflect on what Diksha said, that it's an all women panel. And I think we did discuss this internally and we were very intentional of this. It was also like a way of advocacy and starting a revolution that, you have all male panel, and we would wanted to do an all female panel as well. So thank you for even bringing that point, Diksha. And I think when I'm really listening to all of you, I think I can really break down the tools and what we can really do to create those support systems in role of three aspects, right? So one is role of individuals itself. What when they also we talk about how one has to really take individual accountability for self-care, right? And to be able to have healthy coping strategies, have self-care practices really be part of your daily routines as well, something that do become non-negotiable. Often I think when we are juggling multiple balls, the one ball that gets dropped is of self. And how do we ensure that we hold on to that ball of self uh, fairly in a very gentle manner and not with guilt and shame? The fact that and we almost feel that self-care is selfish, right? Forgetting the fact that self is the foundation of the roles that we play. Even the lawyer starts from the position of self. And Diksha early on in the conversation did talk about emotional check-ins, right? And just how do you really make space to be able to listen to where you're at right now, what's coming up for you, what is your body telling you right now, whether it's tiredness, it's fatigue, it's overwhelm, it's anxiety. What is it that really is coming up for you, what you're experiencing, and what is it that's going to really help you to move to a more comfortable space. And I think that's something even Tusharika spoke about, accessing therapeutic support for yourself. Even if it's not available as part of a system, but how do you really reach out and access the support as well and have more conversations like Bindya did talk about, really break it down and see what went, whatever is cathartic right now, but to be able to support yourself in that space as well and normalize these conversations as well. And I really hope we get to a place as well, Vindhya, where we don't have to say I have a stomach pain. I just, I have my period pain right now, because then that would be also bringing my authentic self and to acknowledge my identity as someone who is menstruating, right? And I say that very consciously because we know the cis women, or we have non-binary folks as well. So any person who menstruates and is able to really acknowledge that and talk about it. That's one about how individuals can really support themselves. The other one I'm looking is also building a sense of community and reaching out for support. And I think the Sharika really spoke about the fact that you actively reach out for support. And what Bindya said, I think her seniors are doing that beautifully, of doing those check-ins with Bindya, that how you're doing, and what Diksha spoke of, that being appreciative. It's very easy to talk about things that have not gone well, but how do you really spotlight those small wins? The fact that you were just being present for someone else. So you may perhaps not things may not the outcome may not go as desired, but how you did show up, how it was difficult on a particular day, but you just still showed up as well. And you're really spotlighting those small wins to bring that morale, the productivity up, and also to remind the purpose and the mere reason why we chose to embark on this journey, right? And how do we then invite that sense of meaning and purpose in life and career? And I think lastly, I think is very crucial. I think it's the role of the organization and institutions, because they do hold a place of privilege, of influence, of power. Organization, if they can really harness that energy that they have right now to be able to have these conversations, which not only normalizes mental well-being and normalizing conversation about the struggles as well, creating space for vulnerability, but also having certain aspects in place, just like how organizations are, like having a mental well-being policy. uh, the fact that it is even being recognized, I think just having a policy itself talks the fact that this is important, right? What is more can be done? What is the road that we need to undertake at that point of having mental well-being committees? And those are things that have already started in the West, where international bar associations or to forums have these committees that are talking about mental well-being, which can also further then take the initiative of having conversations to be able to build that empathy, to really navigate those unconscious biases that may come in because of not knowing enough about a lawyer who who identifies as a woman of a particular ethnic group, or perhaps a person with disability as well, and how that understanding of that identity is influencing judges or stakeholders, rather lawyers as well, or even clients for that matter. When they see a young person coming and saying, okay, I'll be appearing for you, and saying, no, no, do you have your senior come in? Which will also help navigate. So what the Sharika spoke of, that you're not giving those mundane tasks as well. And you're not constantly second guessing yourself that, after 5 years also, I'm still drafting. I mean, for how long can I really do that as well? And that can only become possible if the organizations really come together and really recognize the cultural and the structural working practices which are acting as barriers in these spaces. So I think there is a lot to be done. But I think what we really need is open dialogue, communication, more of it. And I think that's something we have undertaken at Equilibrium Advisory. Equilibrium Advisory is a firm of lawyers and mental health professionals. One of the things that we have taken at Equilibrium Advisory is to have a mental well-being policy. We are proceeding towards our mental health week off. It's going to be a 9-day week off from 23rd of March to 31st of March, where there's going to be a firm-wide shutdown. None of them will be working. The idea is to be able to recharge and really focus on their self-care practices as well. There is access to therapy, which gets reimbursed at the organization level. We are a small startup, right? It's a small team, but the fact it's possible to have these conversations. The other idea, what we also have, is to have a lot of resources for the legal fraternity on our website. So when you click on this link on our landing page or the website as well, you will now, in the days to come, after mental health week off, a lot of resources would be available for all of you. And there is also going to be access to therapeutic support through in-house psychologists, one of them being me as well on the panel. So those are some of the initiatives that we are taking for the legal fraternity, since we work so closely with laws. And I think it's really time right now that we start focusing on the lawyers' mental well-being and making it part of their right to life and to work with dignity. So thank you, all of you, for being part of this conversation. It was an incredible experience for me, and I hope this is just the first of its kind, and we continue to have these conversations.
Thank you,
Thank you so
Smriti.
much.
This is very good.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Smriti, for
Thank
having
you.
us.
Thank you.
Thank you.